So we started at, it was just you weren't doing anything. Then you finally got your first sale. Then you were able to hire some freelancers. Then you get your first 1 to 4 full-time employees. Now you're you were just a manager. You had your first 5 to 9 employees. Now we're at 10 to 20 employees. All right. So we want to get past 20, and we're starting in the 10 to 20 range right now. And the theme of the stage is Productize. All right. And so at this level, 10 to 19 is where we're at. Our role is that you're a director now. So you basically went from a manager to now you're directing. You've got managers underneath of you. And so this is now 1.5 layers of infrastructure. So basically, you're gonna have your first 2, maybe 3 kind of like small managers that are running 2 to 3 people on their team. And that's like that's why we have our first almost 2 layers of infrastructure, but you still have some people that you're directly leading yourself. All right, and so companies here is 2.4 million. So we're going from 3 million to 2.4. So we're still marching our way down in terms of rarefied air. At this level, let's break into product. And so this is the good services and results that you deliver. And so the problem at this level, or the constraint, is that customers have nothing else to buy from you, and then they churn. So you finally figured out what your product is, you finally niched it down, and you're like, okay, so now they buy this new, better, for them product. And then they're like, oh, you have nothing else to sell me. And then you're like, yeah, no, I hate money. And so that's it. That's the end of the relationship, which sucks, right? And so to graduate, we have to connect CS and product together and then make something new to sell them. And so this is what that looks like. So typically this is where a back-end upsell comes into play. So the number of times where we see a business that comes in, maybe they're doing 3 million-ish at this level, sometimes 10, somewhere in that range. This point, they're like, man, we want to be able to scale, but we need a back end, right? We need something else. Our LTV to CAC is getting lower and lower because we're going broader and broader, but our LTV remains stagnant. And so the back end upsell, in my experience, that's how I like to do them, is that it's typically 5 times the price of the core offer. So this is 80-20 coming back again. And so you're like, okay, now that we niche down our avatar, these are the best customers. These are the customers we want to sell. Even within that slice, there's another 80-20 that occurs. And so customers are fractal most of the time, meaning that 20% of people can spend 5 times more. But if you get 20% to buy something that's 5 times more expensive, you double the revenue of the business. Pretty cool. So for example, if you have 100 customers buy something for $1,000, then you get a $100,000 thing. Now, if 20 of those hundreds buy a $5,000 thing, 5x and 1/5, then we get another $100,000. And so this doubles the revenue of the business, even though you're only selling just 20% of the customers another thing. And so don't get confused by like, oh, I'm only why would I have this back end just to have 20 people take it? Well, those 20 might double the business. And not only do they double the business, they might double the LTV to CAC ratio you have, which allows you to continue to expand. If you're like, okay, well, what do I upsell? If I already have my core thing, like what do I do? So these are kind of like the easy themes, and I'll give you an example in the next slide. So one of my favorite upsells in the world, more of that thing you just bought. Second only to more help with that thing you just bought. And then better/newer version of the thing they just bought, or for longer periods of time. And so this is a little matrix that I make for our companies. And I call this the Crazy 8. But you should, as an entrepreneur, be able to run through any business and think of 8 different ways to make a customer more valuable. And so like if I sold chairs, I can increase the price of my chair. So that's one thing I can do. I can get people to buy more chairs. Like how can I reach out to them on a more regular cadence? Maybe once a year they have to refresh the chairs. I can decrease the cost of my chairs. Now that's not necessarily something that's an upsell, but it still generates more LTV for me. I also have cross-sell. So, okay, with your chair, do you want to buy chair covers? What's a thing that's the next natural purchase that would go with that? That's the burger with your fries. So I'll tell you how much I know this because this is duplicated. So we have quality and quantity. And then we have downsell quality and quantity. So I'll walk you through it. So basically, if I want to increase, this would be an upsell. I could say, okay, do you want to buy a wood chair instead of a plastic chair? So that would be a higher quality version of the same thing. I can also go higher quantity of the same thing. So instead of 1 chair, do you want to buy a stack of 10 of the original plastic chairs? Now, on the flip side, if I want to downsell, I can downsell quality or downsell quantity. So instead of 1 chair, do you want to get a kiddie chair? You want a smaller chair? Or instead of a plastic chair, do you want to have a paper chair? Something even worse than plastic. Like the UMHW plastic that's like, bulletproof and Kevlar? Or do you want one of these like really flimsy lawn chairs? You're like, okay, well, how does this increase LTV? It doesn't increase LTV, but it increases how much revenue you make per lead because it takes a no and turns it into a yes. So it goes from a 0 to at least some money. And so this is how you should be able to, for any product or service, walk through this. increase price, get them to buy again, cross-sell something different, decrease cost, upsell quality, upsell quantity, downsell quality, downsell quantity. And you can pretty much do that as your mental matrix for any time you need to make more money with the thing you sell. That was a physical product, but let's talk about a service, since 78% of businesses are services. So let's say you're an agency owner. So I sell marketing services. All right, well, I can increase the price of my services. Okay. I can decrease churn. This gets them to buy again and again. I extend how many times they buy. I can outsource my team to offshore and decrease the cost of my delivery, which is cheaper labor, or I can increase the ratio, meaning one rep can now service 10 companies instead of 5, so I still double my margin. I can cross-sell something different, so I run paid ads as my core thing. Well, I'm gonna also tack on SEO, or I'll also tack on creative, or content, or email follow-up, whatever. I can upsell quality, or like, how do you increase the quality? Well, I can say you're with a junior rep now, you can be with a senior rep or a more experienced rep that's got 5 years of experience, or it's with me, the owner, right? I can upsell quantity. Quantity in a service business is typically gonna be either number of touch points or the duration. So I can sell a contract that's a 12-month contract rather than a 3-month contract, or I can say, hey, we're gonna touch base 3 times a week instead of once a week, right? And then on the flip side, for decreasing quality or decreasing quantity, you just go in reverse of that. Hey, you can't afford me, but I can have you work with one of my reps for less. That would be quality. And then in quantity, it's like, okay, if you don't want to commit to the 12, we can have you commit to the 6 or the 3, or I can decrease my cadence with you so that maybe you don't get, once a week. Maybe you get every other week, or you get chat support rather than Zoom calls, right? And so we can look at that. That would be more of a quality one. But fundamentally, that crazy 8, you should be able to apply to a physical products business or a service business to make anything more profitable. All right, and so at this level, we have productized, we have our second thing, and we went from nothing else to buy to making something new to sell them. And the reason I had Connect CS and product is that if you're like, well, I don't know which one they'll want, that's where customer service can give you the feedback of what people are asking for. Sales can also tag in here so that you can know, okay, of those 8 things, which one should I pick? And then that'll help guide your selection. So I'm gonna talk about marketing at this level, and we're gonna keep the party going. So at this level for marketing, the constraint is that qualified leads are too expensive and they cap your ability to advertise. Remember earlier, the LTV to CAC ratio, because remember, we graduate with the second product, but at this point, we don't have it yet. And so the LTV is not high enough, and so it's getting harder and harder for us to buy leads because they're getting more and more expensive. All right, so to graduate, we do a few things. So one is that we spend more on our niche down messaging with the new offer, right? So that's what we graduate. Okay, we have our upsell, we know we can make more money, so now we can spend more. On top of that, we raise our CAC limit as a result of that second product because we can factor that into the LTV. And then in terms of scoring the leads, we go from them scoring themselves, which is we add friction to the process, to us looking at the leads that are coming in and then scoring them ourselves, which is different. All right. And so then we also have to begin the CRO process, which is conversion rate optimization. So this is having a regular split test cadence across all aspects of the funnel. So remember, we have those basic KPIs where it's like show rate, close rate, offer rate, all of that stuff. Well, we want to see, okay, well, if we do it like this, do we get 10% lift? If we put the button here, do we get a little lift, right? We just have this cadence where we regularly can do that, because sometimes when you get 5%, 20%, 15% across 4 or 5 places, you can double the throughput of a funnel. And at this point, we got to be professionals. Like we got to put our big boy hats on, because now we're getting into the bigger leagues. And so this is what it looks like. So prioritizing leads comes to the leads with the highest closing potential. You pair them with the closers that have the highest potential to close them. All right, and so it's like, okay, you want to put the best leads with the best closers. And so I think about these 3 things. So qualifications is who they are, behaviors, what did they do, and then the source, which is where did they come from. And so, for example, I might know that if a business owner who considers themselves a CEO and has 50 people, that's who they are. Behavior is that I can see that they watched every single video that I have and they bought 2 books, right? And they came from LinkedIn, inbound organic. That lead, by its very nature, might be worth more than somebody who came from TikTok and has a smaller business and only watched 1 reel or 1 clip before opting in on the site. So I can see both those things because we can see the user journey, which is why attribution is so important, which is why we established it earlier, so that we can actually get a better score for our leads. And at this point, why would I want to give the super qualified LinkedIn lead that's got a big business to my worst closer? He could blow it. So I give the best leads to the best guys, and then that is a huge lever on how much you can make. For CRO, instead of explaining how an A/B split test works, I'm just gonna tell you what my priorities are in rough order when I run split tests across anything. So the first thing I'm gonna split test is gonna be my headline and my sub-headline. All right, because those are super light lift and actually have high impact. So if you remember that quadrant we had, high impact, low investment, these are ones that have high impact and low investment. So we want to test the hell out of these. Like the headline on the acquisition.com homepage, we've probably done 30 split tests on that headline, and that's the headline that works, right? And so that's number one. Number two, the next one is going to be the offer itself. And the reason that I test this above the offer is not that the offer isn't more impactful, it's just higher investment. If you change the offer, you have to change everything about the business. You have to change what you deliver, you have to change how the messaging works, all of these other things. Whereas these two are just how you describe the offer. So it can have almost as big of a lift, but it's so much less work. Then you've got the image, which isn't going to be as powerful as the offer, but it can still make a lift. This would be kind of like medium to low impact, but also low investment. And then benefits bullets, proof is a big one. And then everything, you want to make sure that it's above the fold or switch the order around on the pages when you're working through the process. And so sometimes if you put your scheduler higher on the page, it does work better. And sometimes the order of proof matters. Like maybe you need to put the girl first and then the guy. These are things that you test, but in terms of importance, this is how I think through it. And so to do this, installing attribution software for more accurate testing and reporting is super important. Now, that costs money, but at this point, you do have the money to afford it. And this is leveling up. And so after we've made all these improvements to CRO, we have our second product, we are spending more, we've niched down the messaging across the funnel, we can now score our leads and we're putting our leads with our best closers. Now we can recalculate the LTV to CAC ratio and create that new acceptable CAC. Actually, we can now spend $3,000 when we used to only be able to spend $1,000. And we want to understand what our 30-day cash collected is, meaning if we have a prospect that's coming in, how much does it cost us just within the first month to get them in? And is there any way that we can just offset that? If we can just break even in the first 30 days, we're thrilled. If we can do even more than that, we make money getting customers and we still have the LTV on the back end, we're even better. But this is where you start to really gas it, where you're like, as long as I'm not losing money in the first 30 days, I'm good to go. And I'll be honest with you, some of the companies that we have that have achieved tremendous scale, we're willing to lose money for 3, 4, 5 months before we make it back because we know our numbers so well. And so this is how you continue to expand, is you're basically willing and able to spend more than your competition. And so you want to break even to scale ads further, right? And this is how the big boys do it. And like I said, we lose money up front sometimes. And so at this point, you're at stage 5 for marketing. Like we're getting into the big leagues. And so qualified leads are too expensive and they cap your ability to advertise. You're just not making enough. And so spend more money on niche down messaging with new offers, raise your CAC limit so you can spend more. You start scoring your leads, add in attribution and CRO. Woo, there you go. Customer service.
Sales.
Oh, it's sales. Fine, I'm back to sales. It's me again. All right, so the constraint at this level is customers get sold with unrealistic expectations and refunds/bad reviews become an issue. All right, the sales guy said this thing cures cancer, right? Like you don't want that. All right, and so to graduate, create sales aids/materials and install weekly game tape between CS, sales marketing for QA, quality assurance, and feedback. And on top of that, we're gonna track NPS, CSAT, and refund. Now you're like, I thought we were doing that. Now by sales rep. So we were doing this just on the back end before, just to get a general idea. But now we're like, you know what? It turns out everybody that Timmy sells hates us. And everybody that John sells, we're all good with. And so we realized the connection between the expectations being set in sales and what we're actually delivering. And so sometimes because you brought new guys in, they set bad expectations, and so your reputation takes a hit. All right, so let's talk through it. So first one is sales aids. These are slide decks, video sales letters, which I refer to as VSLs. Sales letters are physical sales letters that you can mail out, or digital, you can send PDFs, charts, graphs, data visualization, calculators, anything that help your salespeople sell more consistently. And so here's how I like to think about it. If I have a sales script, right, there's probably a period of the script where the sales guy does the talking, he does a little bit of education, does a little bit of teaching, does a little bit of belief breaking. Well, as a salesperson and who has done a lot of sales, that can get really, really tedious because you say the same thing over and over and over again. So I want to take everything that a salesman says in the perfect pitch that they repeat and put that in front of the sale. And then you say, hey, watch this video. It has data, graphs, visualization. It says it way better than I ever can with nice images to make it sink in. And then after that, when we hop on the call, we can talk about the video and about applying all of that stuff to you specifically. And so that way, the salesman is not having the same conversation every time. And then the prospect doesn't feel like they're just sitting there listening to some guy gab all along, because I think you lose rapport in that. So not only do you shorten your sales call, so your sales utility goes up because the guys don't have to repeat the same 20 minutes 7 times a day. So they get all that time back. And then you have this tool that makes it consistent in terms of the expectations that are being set prior to the call. And so to give you a quick basics on if you have some sort of VSL or video sales that are some sort of pre-sales material, I like to have a very strong and very detailed pain-based hook right at the beginning of the video. So you want to speak specifically to the pain of the avatar, and then you go proof, promise, plan. All right, the promise is going to be related to the pain. Then we hit, why hasn't this problem been solved yet for this person? What's the main impact if it continues? What's the solution and how does the solution work? What makes our solution better than other people's? And then proof that our solution actually works. And then we want to weave this throughout. So the proof is like, you want to weave this all the way through this whole thing. And then after we've kind of hit the main meat, we just hit, what are the risks of investing in this solution? So call them out. Like, you don't want to hide the risk. They're thinking about it. Just say, hey, you're probably afraid that we're going to take this money and go to Nigeria and spend it all. Who knows, right? Whatever, be upfront about it. You're probably worried that this thing's not going to work for this reason. You don't think it's going to integrate with your tools. You're not going to, so let's go handle all those, right? And so then at the final step, you're like, cool, now that we've handled that, you're going to be talking to Sean. Sean's going to take care of you, or you can have it before then they book the call. It's up to you. But VSL, sales aids, presentations, slide decks, these things I inject in almost every sales process I can, because it just creates less volatility and it creates basically less volatility in our sales closing percentage. So instead of being like 20%, 40%, 20%, 40%, I'd rather just know them and be at 30 every week. Right? Now, ideally, I'd just rather be at 40 every week because we found the best sales and then we replicated it over and over again. All right? And so that's the front end on the sales side. So the next thing you want to consider is putting in a game tape. And so game tape review is basically a collaborative meeting between CS, product, sales, sometimes even marketing. And they want to basically have a point where they have transparency into the other parts of the business. And I remember this is kind of the bridge between Layla and I. Like, I tend to be front of house, Layla tends to be back of house. And so this is kind of like the meeting of both sides of what we do every day. And Layla was the one that first implemented this in a business a long time ago. And it made such a massive difference that we've done it in every single business since. And so I'll let Layla break down the specifics of how it works and what the benefits are.
So the first piece is you want to arrange. So we call it the 5 A's. You want to arrange the call, and it's going to be the head of sales is usually one that's responsible for the arranging of the game tape. And so what you want to have them do is basically get a time. It's going to be between 60 and 90 minutes that the head of sales, the head of product, the head of marketing, and the head of CS can all meet. You can add other people from the department too if you think it'd be beneficial for them. Sometimes you have literally all the departments because it can help that much if you have like large discrepancies. But they're going to arrange a time that everybody's going to meet to complete the game tape. And so if your business is experiencing issues right now, maybe there's a discrepancy between, there's high churn, there's customers falling off, they have missed expectations, like you're losing customers left and right. You might want to do this 3 times a week or even every day until the problem's fixed. And so what I want to be clear about is if there's issues, do it until it's fixed. And so if that means you do it every day and it gets fixed in 10 days, great. If it means that you have to do it twice a day, in the morning and in the evening until it's fixed in 5 days, great. You just want to hit it with volume if there's an issue. Normally, if there's not a large issue, I would say that you do this once a week. And so this is to maintain and be preventative to make sure that there are not issues. And actually, if anything, it's not just preventative, it will help all these departments improve. And so the next thing you want to do is assemble. So what the head of sales is going to do is they are going to get a recording from whichever team you are going to review that week. Say it's sales that week. They're going to pull a call. It's either going to be a call that you need to work on, like it didn't close, or it's going to be a call that went really well to show people what went well and what good looks like. And so you're going to have that person pull that call, and they're going to get it from a rep ahead of time. Now, sometimes you're going to do CS calls, right? So you're going to do onboarding calls, you're going to do coaching calls, you're going to do sales calls. And so I'm starting with, okay, they're just going to get a sales call. In the future, and once you start the rhythm of it, you're going to add in onboarding calls, coaching calls, etc. It's just that usually the point that's the issue is the sales call.
A lot of times, your entire onboarding and customer service team has never even seen a sales call occur. They have no idea. They just get these customers that come in. And so it's this huge blind spot. And to the same degree, sales guys have no idea, like the moment they close the sale, they have no idea what happens afterwards. And so right now, if you're watching this, I'll bet you your sales team might not have ever even seen what onboarding looks like. And so this gives transparency across the whole business, because all of a sudden CS is like, why are you guys saying that? It makes such a pain for us. And they're like, the sales guys are like, oh, I didn't know that was a pain for you. And you're like, yeah, they get so upset. And they're like, oh, we cannot say it. It's not even a huge deal. They're like, oh my God, please, yes, please stop saying that. And on the flip side, we do something in CS. They're like, I didn't know we did that. And it's like, yeah, it's like, oh, dude, people would love to hear about that. I'll tell them that on the front end. And so it just creates more congruency between all levels or all departments of the business. So you have one through line, one seamless experience for the customers between expectations set and expectations delivered.
Which is assess what piece of that call you can take into your department. So if you are marketing, what did you learn here? What can you use from that call to improve your marketing? Were there things that were communicated on the call that are not communicating in marketing? Are there things about the customer that you didn't know that you can use in marketing, right? When it comes to sales, are we sticking to the script? Are we not sticking to the script? Are we over-promising or are we under-promising? When it comes to CS, are we saying things on the sales call that we're not looping back to on the onboarding or the coaching calls? Are they promising things that we don't deliver or can't deliver? And so that is what you're going to assess. And so each person, and we will attach an SOP below, will be able to assess individually how it affects their department. And that's the assess piece, which is really, what is everyone going to do based on watching this call? If you watch the call and you don't change any behavior about your department, there's no point in watching the call. And so the question is, what are you going to do to get better based on watching the call? Which brings us to analyze, which is, okay, what's the one thing that we can do for each of our departments, right? So we have all these things that we can do. What's the one thing we are each going to do? And then the last piece is act, which is decide what you're going to act on in the next 7 days by the next game tape. And so you're committing to taking action. If you do this, I promise you, it is one of the most valuable calls that you can put into your entire business, because most people at this point in this stage of business act in silos. And so what you need to move towards is becoming a team of teams. And the only way to become a team of teams is if you all have the same information. I tell my team this all the time, but I'm like, you're not a sales leader or a CS leader. You are a leader in the company who happens to be over sales. You happen to be over CS. You need to understand how the other departments function. Otherwise, you're going to make decisions that are best for your department at the expense of others. And that's why this call is so important, is it really bridges the gap between all the departments. It just happens to focus on sales.
And a lot of other departments like customer service can learn from sales overcomes. Like they watch a salesman overcome a concern. They're like, oh, that's good. I'm going to say, because we get that too. And they're like, oh yeah, this is how we overcome it. They're like, oh, no idea. And then the marketers can watch and be like, oh, they're presenting on these sales calls with this pain. Dude, I'm going to use that in our hooks. Like, oh yeah, we didn't tell you. They all come in with this issue. And so we've been advertising one hook, but there's actually a much more painful hook that many of the right types of customers present with. And so it just creates huge amounts of transparency in the business. And like, it's something, I'll be honest with you, it was something that I wasn't like super for when Layla said it. I was like, you want to do a meeting of 4 departments on one call, like regularly? That sounds like a lot. Because you think about the dollar per head count per hour, you're like, oh my God, this is a $10,000 call. But we definitely made significantly more than $10,000 from it. And I want to reinforce what Layla said there, which is you do it once a day or twice a day if you're like in red hot, like there's a problem. But you can get to once a week or every other week and be okay. And if you let's say you get to once every other week, then it's like you do one sales call and you do one CS call, and that's your month, right? So like it can get less frequent as there are fewer issues. The last piece here is the NPS/CSAT/refund rate tracked down to the rep. And you will see pretty quickly that your refunds are probably coming from like 1 or 2 reps. And it will drive you bananas. But the good thing is that usually it comes down to one of these things, which is they set bad expectations or they overpromise. So the street term for this is they sell hot. It's basically, it's a nice way of saying they're lying. And so you want to minimize that or eliminate it altogether, obviously. State the facts and tell the truth has been our number one code of marketing and sales that we have. Like if you ask anybody in our departments, like what is the rule? That's the rule. And if the truth isn't compelling enough, then change reality so that it is. All right, and so that's sales at this level. And now we started with customers get sold with unrealistic expectations and refunds and bad reviews become an issue. So we create sales aids and VSL so we can standardize sales processes and increase the conversion rate. We install weekly game tape between all the departments so that we can get cross-departmental learning and so we can have quality assurance and faster feedback loops so we can fix things. And then we start tracking NPS, CSAT, and refund rate by the rep so that you can be really targeted on Okay, we do have a high refund rate, but we just have one guy who has an insane refund rate and everybody else is fine. Okay, then now we can get really specific with what we need to fix. We had a company in the portfolio that was at this exact stage at Productize, needing to make and sell a second premium product. It was a service-based business for consumers. They didn't have a back-end offer to sell their existing customers, and that's when we actually decided to turn it into a SaaS business. So we did all the above. We created sales aids with the new offer, spent more on advertising, we dialed in the avatar, we promoted internal teammates up into the company so we could expand, and that was the beginning of their path to an insane growth rate over the last 2 years. We were able to double the LTV per customer, and now it's actually gone up even another 50% after the double. And so now they're at over $100 million of annual run rate as a software business, which means that company right now is conservatively valued at $350 million, probably up to 500, maybe 600 million, depending on the buyer. And so that's a huge amount of value creation in a short period of time, only done by prioritizing the few things that mattered most. And this was only possible by creating that second backend, that productized second offer that made all of this scale possible. And so if you're at this stage and you would like our help to get to the next stage, not only have we done it once, we've done it many times. And so if you don't have a scaling roadmap, below this video, you can click and get your own. But if you already have one and you're like, you know what, I would love to get more tailored, industry-specific advice for my business right now, I'd love to have you come out to a workshop that we have here in Vegas where we're based at acquisition.com. And so if that sounds interesting, you can click somewhere around this video or above it where it says, apply to see if you qualify for our workshop. And if you do, can't wait to meet you. And that leads us to the servicing of customers.
All right, so customer service is how you get customers to refer, retain, review, and resell. Customers come in with unrealistic expectations and they get inconsistent answers, right? So they talk to one person, they get one kind of answer, they talk to another person, they get another kind of answer. And so to graduate this, you want to build out a proper customer service playbook to onboard and train your team to answer questions the same way. You also, again, you're going to have weekly game tape review and customer ascension path. What does this look like when it comes to building out a CS playbook? Okay, it's really, I want to break it down to be a little more simple than it sounds for you guys, which is one, we want to categorize all the questions that we're getting. So right now, your CS reps are getting all these questions coming in from customers. And it's always this, which is like, they're like, we have so many questions and like, we just have too much customer service. We need to hire more people. Okay, before you do that, here's what I want you to do. Take all of the questions that are coming in by customers and chunk them into 5 categories. There's always 3 to 5 categories that have the most amount of questions that come. Yes, are there random ones that don't fit within? Of course. But there's usually 3 to 5 categories that get the most volume of questions, okay? So examples might be like, I want to change my card. I got to change my address. If it's a physical product, I want a different flavor. I want a different cadence that you're sending me these things on a monthly basis. Or I want to increase or decrease my amount that I'm getting, right? And so there's just some examples of categories. And then what you're going to do is once you have these 5 categories, your CS playbook is going to be the templated answers to the most common questions in those categories. And so the way that you get consistent is just like you would get consistent sales by implementing a script, you get consistent CS by implementing templates. And so the common way to do this is to create, whether it be email templates, whether it be a QA framework, however you're answering, whether it be like an intercom, whether it be like emails, whether it be like a ticketing system. It's really easy to have resources where they can take those and they can fill in the template with somebody's name, with their problem, but it has the basic meat so that at least we know they're answering the same questions with the same answers. What you do from there is, because you want to make sure that people can take action without having to ask their manager for every single thing that happens, right? We want to create 4 actions that a rep can take to over-deliver and delight a customer to create raving fans. So this is what an employee empowerment wheel looks like. And when you have an empowerment wheel, this is where you can create those actions from, okay? So what does this mean? In the dark color, these are things that people have to get approval from, right? So if you have a CS rep, they have to get approval for a contract or a legal issue, a major operational decision, regulatory issues, right? Where on this side, we have minor things that they can take action on and we empower them to solve in their own way, and we create templates for how to solve those things. So if somebody has a public communication issue, if there's a direct customer communication, if there's a minor operational decision they have to make, if there's a credit or refund issue, if there's discounting somebody or giving them a bonus, those are all things that we can give someone empowerment to take action on to delight the customer. And so at this point, we don't want to just have the CS playbook with the templates. We also want to empower people on the CS team to over-deliver and delight a customer to create raving fans, but we need to tell them what things they can do to empower with the customer. If somebody is asking for a $20,000 refund, that's something that you probably want the manager to make that decision. But what if we say, hey, actually, they can make any decision up to $2,000 for the customer? An example of that would be like the Ritz-Carlton. So every Ritz employee has up to $2,000 per guest per day to over-deliver if they mess up. And then they have options of here's 5 ways that you can spend that $2,000 to delight a customer. And so I'll give you an example is in our last company, if we made a mistake with the customer, we had, of course, you can refund the customer if they're upset up to a certain amount without any approval at all of the manager. However, most people don't want a refund. They just want to make it right. They don't want a refund. They want it right. And they want what they wanted in the first place, right? They want your product or service. They just want the result. And so we had it where they could offer an upgrade for free. That was one of the options. We had another option that they could offer time with one of our senior coaches for free. That was one of the offers. And then we also had it that they could send them a personal custom gift that's up to $1,000 without having to ask. Those were 3 options that we gave our CS reps within their empowerment wheel as options of actions they could take on things to delight the customer. The last piece is the ascension path. Okay, so with a new product, you must make a clear ascension path. Okay, and so what that looks like is understanding when you're going to offer that customer to buy the next thing. Okay, here's the thing that we have found out is that everyone always asks, they're like, when should I send the customer? And I'm like, listen, everybody's ready at a different point in time. Some customers, actually, they're in a buying frenzy and they immediately want to buy the next thing when they bought the first thing. It's kind of like when I go shopping and I'm like, just because I bought 1 coat at Chanel doesn't mean I want 4 more. Of course I'll buy 4 right now because I feel like I just spent money. I might as well just spend more money, right? The second is you've got it 24 to 48 hours later, right? So they get on, they do an onboarding call with your team, or they get the first delivery of the value, right? And then they're like, wow, this is awesome. I feel excited. I'm excited. I haven't gotten the result yet, but I'm excited. And at that point, they want to buy the next thing because they're like, I already am impressed in the first 24 to 48 hours. So like, why would I not want to buy more from them, right? And you could also offer to ascend them with like a discount for being, an early bird special, whatever you want to call it. The next place is when they get their first big win. So it's like, they tell you how much they appreciate the product or service. They leave a testimonial. They recoup their investment. Like if you're B2B, when we had Gym Launch, for example, when people made back $16,000, which is what they paid us, that was their big win. So that is another point at which you can ascend a customer. And then the last 2 are the halfway point. When someone is halfway through the product or service, that's a pretty standard point at which you want to go ahead and offer an ascension or offer an upsell to somebody. And then you really have your last shot, which is like, I'm just gonna throw it. I'm just gonna give my last shot. Like we've tried every other time, you have not taken it, and we're gonna give a last Hail Mary effort, right? And we actually did something really cool when we had Gym Launch, which was our last shot to customers to ascend them into what we called our upper level program, which was anywhere between $35,000 and $50,000 a year.
Is we'd send this old school lumpy mail package. So it's this zebra print mailer that would absolutely stand out, and it was lumpy, right? There's stuff to it. And so as soon as they'd open it up and they would pour out the contents, it was just a ton of rubber bands. And then there were 2 letters. And so the first one said open first and the second one said open second. So they'd open the first letter up. And I always wanted to simulate like what it's like to get money on a birthday or something, or if you're Chinese for New Year or whatever it is, right? And so they'd have a card, it would open up, there'd be a $100 bill inside of it. And so inside the letter, it would say, we're at this point in the process, you've made this much back. I hope that you're enjoying it. We do a bad job as entrepreneurs to take a moment to like smell the flowers. And so I'd like to take you out to dinner. And so although I can't, be there physically with you, go to a nice restaurant around you, celebrate what's happened. The first, drinks and appetizers are on me, whatever. And you might be wondering why you have all these rubber bands. And so the story is Pablo Escobar ended up getting caught and they were analyzing his financials. And they had this one line item that said rubber bands for $4,000 every week. And they kept being like, what is rubber bands code for? What is what's the code? Is this human trafficking? Like, what is this? And so he just cracked up and he was like, no, it's just rubber bands. And they're like, for what? And he was like, for all the cash. And so they were making, and just to give you context, like a bag of rubber bands is like $2. And each one of those is wrapping bills. And he was buying $4,000 rubber bands a week. And so the reason that I had the rubber bands inside of there was I'd say, and for the thing that's going to be in the next letter, you're going to need some of these. And so they would open the second letter when they're out at dinner, and then the second letter had a personalized video that we had made for them that they would watch together after they had a glass of wine, they were out at dinner, and that would then make the call to action to make the next level of ascension.
The point is, put effort into each shot. Most business owners don't ascend people, not because the people don't want to ascend, but because they're asking them at the time that they're not ready. You have up to 5 times that you could ask a customer to ascend, and most people are only asking at one point in time. And so what you want to do is build out the ascension path so your team knows we are asking at all these different points in times. Now, I will say one thing, which is that you want to have leading indicators of when you want to ask a customer. And so what will go with each of these things is immediate, right? How do we know if we're going to immediately offer somebody, right? They might express on a sales call that they actually would really love the next product. And so you're like, hey, by the way, I think they really want this next thing. When they get their first big win, they might say like, I can't even imagine that I never worked with you guys. It might just be that they leave a really amazing testimonial, right? And we know they've recouped their investment. You can tie leading indicators to all of these things. For example, the halfway point, something that we did at Gym Launch was we had to make sure that those people were netting a certain amount of money per month from their business in order to say that they qualified for a halfway point ascension sale, because then we knew that they could afford the investment that it was going to be.
And so I boiled down ascensions and any kind of upsell into 3 things: right product, right time, right way. And so if someone doesn't buy, you offered it to them at the wrong time, or you offered them the wrong thing, or you did it in a way they didn't like. And so my 2 cents on having put a lot of sales processes together is most times the sales fail because you didn't actually try. And so what I mean by that is like, make it cool. You know what I mean? Like that whole rubber band, like I thought, I was like, what would be the coolest thing I could think of? And so I feel like so many business owners are just lazy with it, and then they get lazy results. And so it's like unsurprising, right? And so it's like, okay, if I have 5 opportunities, well, not only am I going to ask it those 5 times, I'm going to ask in a different way each of those 5 times and have maybe a different incentive that's associated with that, that's more relevant to that time period or the problems that they're dealing with. We might lead with a different hook in terms of how we're like, you might not have taken the first hook that we said, hey, to get more of that thing. So then maybe the second way we offer even the same product is just a different way to offer the same thing. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was this. It's like, oh no, we also do this, and I think that would help you. And so we want to kind of be like a Rubik's Cube of being willing to change our sides depending on where the customer's at in the journey with the business. And so I can't overstate this, like make it cool. You know what I mean? Like make it an offer so good they feel stupid saying no, and fewer of them will.
So that is customer service. Customers came in with unrealistic expectations. They got inconsistent answers. You graduate by having a proper CS playbook to onboard and train the team so that they are consistent. You get in the game tape review, which is also in sales, and you create a customer ascension path that everybody understands. So next we move to IT, which is how you gather, store, analyze, and display information. And so right now, the constraint of IT is that employees are using their personal hardware and software, which creates issues when people leave, right? There's no tracking for leads and customers interacting with your business. And so to graduate, the company needs to provide company-owned and controlled hardware and software. Also, you need a dashboard and a reporting system, okay? So what does that look like? It looks like getting them company hardware, okay? Here's the thing. I learned this in my first business, which is like, don't skimp. If what you're getting them is like a shitty, I don't even know what you use anymore, T-Mobile or something. I only have Verizon, so I have no idea. What's a shitty phone?
Well,
service?
It's like you can get a bad phone, you can get bad service, you can get bad internet, you can get a bad computer that's slow, you can have them not have enough memory or
100%.
enough RAM. Like all of these things affect their productivity.
And the thing is that they won't use them if their personal devices are better, faster, and more up to date. And so do not be cheap. Invest in their work devices. Just have very strong policies in place around that you get those things back if they leave. And if they damage them, what they're liable for versus what you're liable for, and get freaking insurance on all of your shit. That being said, it can go in the employee handbook that they turn them in when they're fired or when they quit.
Just to give you a monetary incentive for this, if you think, for example, that someone, like if you have a computer, like their personal computer versus a work computer would have twice the upload speed or download speed time, or that would be like on a media department. If you have a sales guy who has bad connection, and if he had an upgraded materials or upgraded service, he'd be able to have way fewer drop calls. What's like a really good laptop and phone and everything might cost like $2,000 or $3,000, right? And like on a sales guy, you would literally make that back on one sale a year. And so it just makes almost no sense not to do. And this is just something that I am the cheaper of the two of us. And so I'm like, they can use a pigeon. You know what I mean? Like they can send mail. You know what I mean? They can use these cheap Android phones. But the thing is like I was the one who ended up losing out overall. So it's like make the slightly higher short-term investment to get way more on the tail. It's also a cool factor. Like you get a new job, you get some new gear. Just like we have an all moment that we have for our customers, you can have the same thing for your team. And it doesn't cost much. Like you have a $100,000 a year employee and you spend $2,000, that's a 2% relative to their income. It's like, can we get even just the buy-in that they think it's cool, does that raise their productivity 2%? Maybe. Like if they enjoy working on their computer more, they will work more. And I'll also say, if you've ever had somebody walk away with like all your SOPs or all your customer data or all your files of videos that you recorded content on and you have none of the originals because they took like, this is why you have to own this stuff, because now you start making real investments and the products of their work belong to the company. Not just not the hardware, the stuff they did on the hardware belongs to you. If you have these super complex models that they built, but it's just on the computer and it's gone, it's gone.
So for IT, people are using their personal software and hardware. And so to graduate, we want to provide them with their own. So the next one we move to is recruiting. So recruiting is how you find and hire people to work for you in your company. So at this level, you have trouble finding higher level roles or managers, okay? And so to graduate, you want to make sure that you have deliberate promotions from within rather than defaulting to what we're going to call the Peter principle. And you want to incentivize employee referrals so that your cost to acquire talent stays low. Okay, so I will break down. So the Peter principle is when people are promoted to the point of their incompetence, okay? And so a lot of times what happens is that you promote people because of convenience. Because you're like, I don't know who else would go there, and I don't really know how to find the people to go there. And so what happens is you have shitty managers. And so your business actually then loses efficiency because then you have people who are inexperienced or incompetent, or both, which is often the case. You promote people to be managers who are both inexperienced and incompetent in the role. And so because of that, things start to suffer in the business. If you do it in sales, sales will suffer. If you do it in CS, CS will suffer. If you do it in finance, finance will suffer. And so the department will always suffer because of the incompetence or inexperience of the person that's over it.
And you lose twice when that happens. One is you lose an individual contributor who was really good, and then so you lose that guy, and then that guy now fills into a role where he also sucks as manager. So you lost a contributor and your manager sucks, so everybody else starts sucking too. Like it hurts you twice.
So here's what you want to do to protect yourself against this, okay? Put your people through the normal hiring process to see if they would even get hired if they came from the outside. That's the first thing that you can do because process protects us from our emotions, okay? The second thing is have them prep an interview for the role like normal. So a lot of times what happens is you go into it and you're like, oh yeah, they're gonna go through the process. And then people don't actually ask them the same questions or grade them like they would somebody else. You have to make sure that you treat them just like they're a candidate coming from the outside. Or if you're like, I do think the person is ready for this role, you can do what you call a try before you buy trial period. Okay, and so what that means is you're going to essentially give them 60 to 90 days to try the role. Okay, so what this might look like is you say, hey, you know what? You're a CSM, you're a customer success manager. You want to be a customer success director. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and give you a 60-day trial period. That 60-day trial period, I'm going to outline the milestones that you need to hit, the things that you need to complete in order to pass the trial. And so what you would want to think through is basically like, if you were to bring somebody new into this role, what would they do in the first 60 to 90 days? That actually is a great benchmark for what the trial needs to complete because you're seeing essentially if they can do the job. And so the reason I like this is because if I have confidence in somebody and if they like learning and growth, this is a way that you can invest in them and give them a shot at the role. So the worst case is that they come out with more skills even if they don't get the role. The best case is they have more skills and they get the role. And the way that you can measure this is essentially by you take the job description for the role that they're wanting to get and you just highlight it red, yellow, green. Here's where you suck, red. Here's where you're okay, yellow. Here's where you're great, green. And then from those, you can go over it with them and say, great, by the end of this trial, these all need to be green for you to get the role. It is like that. It's that objective. And then you can have check-in periods with those people, say on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, to talk about the progress they're making towards that try before we buy period. And so either way, put them through the normal interview process or have them try before you buy. Either one, notice that you're being objective, not subjective. Do not put people in a role out of convenience, do it out of intention. And you have to do that by putting these processes in place. Now, the last thing I will say is that when you are trying to get better people in managerial roles, right, and you're trying to get better people overall, focus on employee referrals, okay? This is the crazy thing. People who are referred by somebody else in the company stay 70% longer. 70%. And just like increasing your LTV is like the goal of most business. It's like, how do we increase LTV? Because if we increase LTV, it makes everything else easier. We can spend more money on all these other things. The same goes for employees. If you can get them to stay longer, you can invest more in the hardware. You can invest more in the software. You can invest more in employee gatherings and meetups. You can invest more in training them. You can invest more in all those things if your people stay longer. And so you get that by getting referrals from people. And so then what happens is, just like there's CAC, there's CAT, right? Which is the cost to acquire talent. And so if you can get people to refer, then you can do that. Now, an easy way that you can do that is by thinking about it like this. How much money would you pay a recruiting agency to bring in somebody to your team? It's like, okay, well, average agency takes 20% of the role. Say you're hiring for somebody that's $80,000 a year. So you're like, okay, well, shoot, I'm going to be paying, whatever, $16,000, $17,000 to this agency to find this role. Well, couldn't you take like half that and pay your team for a referral? Seriously. And so it's actually really interesting because in our first business, we paid $2,000 to an employee for a referral. Now we pay $5,000 to an employee for a referral. And there's a significant increase in how hard people will try to refer somebody into our business, because it's almost like, imagine if they could refer 5 people. I mean, gosh, that's $25,000. That could be a third of somebody's salary, if not half of somebody's salary. That's incredibly meaningful. And so you want to make sure that if you want employee referrals, employees are incentivized to refer. And so look at what it costs you to acquire talent and then say, okay, I could pay all the way up to that to acquire talent.
And so a friend of mine had an insurance business, and he was kind of stuck for a few years, and his was a kind of a broker agent model. So it was just all about headcount, like how many productive agents could he recruit to his insurance company. And he realized that a productive insurance broker or agent made him $250,000 a year. And so his whole business transformed when he said, okay, well, I'll give 10% of that year one to get somebody. He just delayed when they would give it until the point that they had become productive. And so he started giving $25,000 for every agent that people brought into his firm, because he's like, I would happily pay $25,000 to make $250. And so if you have a revenue producing role specifically, and you know what that role should do when it's productive, it's the same LTV to CAC ratio as you have on a customer. It is literally a reinvestment in the business, and you have an expected return. And so it's one of the huge, like, most underutilized ways to compound a business is just pay the entire team. And the other benefit of this, and Layla brought this up with the referral staying longer, is guess what else they do? Is you have an internal champion that wants their friend to succeed. And so they get the discretionary effort of the person who referred them because they want them to be productive by day 90 so they can get their commission, right? And so it's like, they also are only going to bring in the smartest people because they're like, well, I don't want somebody who's going to drag ass. I got to work with this guy. And so they're only going to bring in the best people. They're going to work extra hard to make sure they're productive. And they're going to drag them through that higher bar that you set for the much bigger payout. And then you as the business owner, and everybody wins. And you don't have to pay Zuckerberg. You don't have to pay these recruiting firms. You keep the money in the family. And by family, I mean team.
So for recruiting, right, we have trouble finding higher level roles and managers. And so to graduate, we need to deliberately promote people and then also incentivize referrals, which brings us to human resources. Okay, so human resources is how you decrease the likelihood that regulators and employees sue you. Exciting. And so the constraint at this point is you're firing people incorrectly, and so you're exposed. So most people at this point, they're like, I know how to hire people, but they have a really hard time knowing how to fire people, right? And so to graduate, you want to create a termination policy and process. Okay, so what does that look like? There's a couple different things. I'm going to connect some SOPs down below because I think that firing people well is one of the most important things you can do as a business, both from a risk standpoint and from a cultural standpoint. Because think about it like this. There's the risk that you get sued for firing somebody incorrectly or following the wrong process. There's also the risk of how you damage the culture if you fire people incorrectly with no process. If you just fire people unpredictably, following no process, and your team thinks you just do it whenever you feel like it, who's even going to want to stay on your team? Probably nobody. They're not going to feel safe. They're going to feel like that guy's just like a loose cannon. We never know when Sally or Jerry's going to go, right? And so here's what you want to think about. 1, firing well. Firing should never be a surprise for people, okay? Most of the times when I have to fire somebody, it is absolutely not a surprise. I will tell you that the last few that I've had to fire, they already knew when we got on the call. They were like, I knew what this was going to be because we had talked about it the week prior. If this continues, if we go one more week with this thing happening, then it's not going to work out and we're going to have to, you should look for another job. And then we get on the call, they're like, I need to look for another job, right? And I'm like, yeah, you got to look for another job. And so you want to get it to the point where it's not a surprise, because here's the thing. People feel like, I don't want to make them feel bad. I don't want to. Okay, well, you could either make them feel bad and then they get to keep their job because they know what they're doing wrong, or you can make them feel bad when you let them go and they have no idea why you let them go. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're very explicit about what someone's doing wrong and if they're at risk of losing their job before you even get to firing them. So what this does is it eliminates you as an option for being why they're getting fired. Most of the times people come to me and they say, Layla, how do I know if I should fire my friend? It's always a red flag for me because I'm like, does your friend know that you think that he's so bad that he should be fired? And they're like, I'm like, okay, well then you're the problem. If they don't know how bad it is, you're the problem. So you need to eliminate you as the option. And so what you want to do is give more than you want to give to this person. You want to make sure that you give them all the resources, that you properly tell them where they're sitting. Are you a red, yellow, or green? Hey man, right now, you're a yellow for me. And so it could either go green or it could go red. And I really want it to go green, but it could go red if these things keep occurring. So what can we do to get you back on track to be a green? Simple language like that works really well when you're having these conversations because you're telling them where you're at, but you're also telling them you can be a green and I want to help you get there. Okay. So the first thing I want to state is that this should not be a surprise. You want to eliminate yourself as an option because here's the thing. You could fire people incorrectly all day, but nobody's going to fire you. So if you're the problem, the only person that can solve that problem is you. And so eliminate yourself as the option. Now, if you've determined, okay, this person is an issue, I've identified they're a bad culture fit, they're a bad skill fit, or they don't have any motivation, right? And I have told them where they sit, they're a yellow, they're not getting better, they're actually turning into a red. Then we want to talk about when to fire that person, right? Which means we want to prepare ahead of time. We want to make sure that when we fire somebody, it has the least disruption to the rest of the business. So what does that mean? It's actually quite simple. Most people actually delay it. They're like, it's going to need to be months. So that most of the time what it means is that when you fire that person is when it's not going to disrupt the rest of the team because you've prepared ahead of time. You've determined, okay, I'm going to fire this CS rep, right? I've got to fire Sarah on Monday. Well, I've determined that these other 4 reps can take on 15% more work each. And so I already have a spreadsheet set with here's the customers going to each rep, and then here's her other things she's doing outside of this, and here's who they're going to go to, and here's what I'm going to take on. And so ahead of time, you determine how you're going to disperse responsibilities before you let somebody go, and then you let somebody go at a time that doesn't disrupt other people's work. So you want to make sure, ideally, the more inexperienced your team, it's right before you're going to meet with your team. So then you can get on a call and say, hey, I want to tell you guys what just happened. I want to explain what just went on here. Ideally, you don't do it before you have a really big sales day for the sales team, right? So example is if you're going to let go of a sales guy, do it at the end of the day. Because otherwise people are going to be in their heads. They're like, what the fuck's happening? What's this? It's you want to give people time to process, especially the less experienced the team, the harder it's going to be for them to hear. If I let someone go who has a lot of friends on the team, I know that it's going to be in their head all day. It's going to disrupt their workflow. And so I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to do it at the end of the day. I'm going to make sure I have 2 hours that I can answer questions for those people. The last thing is how to fire a person, right? So you've created a plan, you create the coverage, then you do the deed, which again, we're connecting a script in the SOP below. And then you're going to want to tie up loose ends. You're going to want to let them know, hey, I'm going to send you an email that's going to give you the information about your last paycheck, about the severance we're going to give you, and about the benefits and what's going to happen to them, as well as where you can turn in your computer. And so if you fire well, if you know when to fire a person so it doesn't disrupt the rest of the organization, and if you fire them in a way that is not personal but objective, then you will have completed this process and you'll be able to protect yourself from risk, both from a compliance standpoint and from a cultural standpoint.
I'll also add this in, is that the 3 reasons, you've got culture fit, skill fit, will fit. Well, if somebody doesn't have skills or they have low will, then the good news is that when you check on coverage, there's not much they're doing. And so the amount of times where we've had somebody where we got to get rid of this person, and we're like, I don't know what's going to happen. And we get rid of them and nothing happens, is more times than not. The only times where you can really feel it, in my opinion, has been when we have somebody who's really effective, but they're a bad cultural fit and they're just kind of a cancer on the team. Those are, I would say, significantly rarer than the other 2. And so I would give this to you to say that so many people just sit with these ones for such a long time just because they're pansies and are unwilling to just have one hard conversation with the person. And so please avoid that, because I've heard somebody in the same conversation say, oh, I've got to let go of this guy, he doesn't do anything. And then say, oh, I can't let him go because we'd have to replace all the stuff he's doing. It's like, well, you just said he's not doing anything. So you just use that as an excuse so that you don't have to have the hard conversation.
Most of the time, people are avoiding the conversation. They're not avoiding what happens after the conversation. And so that's why I've included the SOP, is because I understand it's hard to have those conversations. Let me tell you, after doing this for a decade, I don't look forward to firing people. I still get sweaty, I still have a stomach ache, I still am up the night before. No matter how many, I've done it more times than I would like to share. And so what I want to say is, like, it's not like suddenly it's going to get easier with like some magical thing that happens. There's no magic. There's just that you do it scared, anxious, annoyed, frustrated, worried. You just do it anyways. And the thing is that I know that you feel bad because some of these people, you're thinking about somebody right now and you're like, but they have a family and they have this and they have this. And I'm like, yeah, and they deserve to go somewhere that they have a future. And every day that you hold on to that person, you prevent them from having a future in their career. And so you're saving your own feelings in the short term, but then damaging theirs in the long term. You're preventing them from actually tracking with the career that they can have somewhere else. And so I think take that frame, because you don't serve anybody by keeping them in a job where they have no future. So that being said, HR, we were firing people incorrectly, we were exposed. We create termination policies and processes, which brings us to finance.
All right. So the constraint of this level is that you don't know how much money you can reinvest into growth. And so to graduate from here, you make a budget so you can save for big expenses. You create simple financial forecasting, which is like, okay, well, if this continues into the future, this growth rate or even this plateau rate, what things can we expect to have happen and what things can we plan for? And then you begin keeping track of tax write-offs. So we did little versions of this. Now we're kind of doing the slighter, bigger boy version of this. All right. And so thinking about the big expenses / investments coming up. So this is like events. You have a big promotion you run twice a year. Inventory that you're going to buy in the future to make sure that you can get some economies of scale. You're going to pre-order a little bit more than normal so you can decrease your average cost, but it's going to cost more cash today. You might have equipment that you're going to need. Okay, we get to 1,000 widgets a day on this machine. We're going to need another machine. If we get to 20 lawns a day, then we need another, lawnmower. Right? If we're going to open up a new location, if we're brick and mortar, all these things are expenses and or investments that are coming up. Investments are things that increase the output of the business. Expenses typically are things that just allow you to continue running the business as is. All right, so figuring out how much they're going to cost and where you're going to need it. And so as soon as you have this forecast of like, we're going to probably do it on these days, it's going to cost this much, then you say, okay, well, how much do I need to save per month to make sure that it's smooth for us cash flow wise? Then you figure out how much you're going to have with your current run rate 6 to 12 months out. And then you start, and then the last piece here is you have write-offs. And so as you have more expenses and more investments, you can write off more and more things from a tax perspective, which is one of the benefits of being a business owner. And so pretty much that's it for finance. Like, there's not a huge amount there. Like, the big point here, you don't know how much money you can reinvest in growth, and you need to. And so we make a budget, we save for the big expenses, we put a forecast in place so we can actually make a guess based on how much cash flow we're going to have. And then we begin keeping track of those expenses and write-offs so that at the end of the year, maybe we don't get hit with as big of a tax bill. And so the bottom line at this level of Productize is that right now you had nothing new to sell new customers because your LTV to CAC was too low. And so we had to expand the LTV to CAC. We had to create a second product around that. And so to graduate, we make and sell our second premium product to those customers and then continue to reinforce the infrastructure of the business as we continue to scale. And so at this point, we've graduated from 10 to 19. And so now our business should be at the point where we're in the 20 to 50 range. All right. So we're starting to become, like, we're starting to really be a business. And we go from productizing, where we had to create the second product, to now we need to optimize. And if you're brand new to this, or this is the first video you've seen, and you're like, man, this is really cool. Well, we can create a custom plan for you. And so we spent a long time. So me and the acquisition team, our functional experts, I talked to 3 billionaires to vet the model that I have here. And they were like, dude, this thing's so accurate. It's crazy that you're just giving this away for free. And so inside of it, you'll have exactly where you're at in the roadmap, what you need to do at this level, what you need to do the level before that you can tick and tie off, and then what things that you need to prepare for that next level. So that not only are you saying, okay, I've shored up my back end, I've got everything I need to do today, but I'm solving today's problems with sight, or with a line of sight to the future, so that I'm not screwing myself for the next step. And I would say, honestly, a big benefit of taking a page out of someone else's book is that we've made a lot of mistakes. And now we've done this 4 times, getting to 100 million in terms of enterprise value for companies. And sometimes it's tough because you'll get somebody who's 1 step ahead of you and they'll just tell you what to do the next step. But they don't know that 1 step ahead of them, they're going to actually have to backtrack 2 steps and then do it again right. And so we've been all the way to the top of this pyramid multiple times. And so some of the things that we're telling you to do along this way might not feel like it makes sense at that point, but we know because the first time we went up the mountain, we're like, man, it would have been so much better if we had not messed that up. And then the second time we're like, we got all these ones right, but then here was a lot of friction. And then the third time. And so every time we do it, it gets faster and faster that we go up this mountain. And so I'd just like to help you do the same. And so it's free, it's custom specifically to your business. There's a button below this, you can go opt in for it. If you want it, just enter your information and we'll send it to you. Otherwise, we'll see you at the next level for stage 6, optimizing.